Hello team, this is an interview I'm doing for Sophie at the Daily Star, excuse me, and it's for Armed Forces Day, I believe. So Sophie, thank you very much. I just realised while answering your questions in the video, I didn't mention my books. I don't really make money off my writing, not of any consequence, but what I do get to do is share the story of men's mental health, which is just grossly overlooked in this country, and also the veteran story. A massive amount of veterans. I think we've had 33 already this year commit suicide. Generally, more veterans will commit suicide after a conflict than were killed in the conflict itself, which is a horrifying statistic. So my first book was, if you can see that, Eating Smoke, One Man's Descent into Crystal Meth Psychosis in Hong Kong's Triad Heartland. Available on Amazon. It's the story of how I left the Royal Marines to run a successful business in Hong Kong, but 6 months later I was chronically addicted to crystal meth and working as a nightclub doorman for the Hong Kong Triads. And during this time I was heavily in what's known as clinical psychosis, so I kind of really lost the plot. Doctors didn't think I would ever recover. But this next book, 40 Nights, it's the sequel to Eating Smoke, although it is a standalone book. So 40 Nights, available on Amazon. This is the story of how, without any doctors, without any addiction groups like AA or whatever, without any really much support from family or friends, I picked myself out of a very bad situation, or a dark situation, a dark experience, I should say, and went on to achieve every goal I ever, dreamt of across 80 countries around the world. And I'm available for public speaking on a whole range of subjects, from mental health, resilience, addiction, adventuring, running 999 miles non-stop. And folks can contact me through my website, THRALL.com. Brilliant. Hiya Sophie, thank you very much for doing this. I'm just going to dive straight into your questions. Hope you can see me all right here. It's a bit dark. So if you go to THRALL.com, you can get all my bio, basically the whole outline of my life story, and more recently my 999 miles non-stop run from John O'Groats to Land's End, which I raised I think about £18,000 for the Batten Foundation. I ran on my own, i.e. unsupported. I slept by the side of the road when I sort of got tired, and then got up the next day and went on again. I ran an ultramarathon every day, and yeah, it's you got a question here about, how has my book helped other veterans? I'll talk about that, but my run really did massively help a lot of people. I think not just veterans, but with mental health issues being so prevalent in society now, to just get up and go and do something. I did it with no training whatsoever. I'd been disabled for 3 years with a spine injury. I'd had surgery, opened, sort of major open surgery once, and another I think four spinal procedures. And no, I just went up to John O'Groats, said I'm going to run the length of the country, I'm going to run an ultramarathon a day, I'm going to carry 14 kilo rucksack, and I'm just going to do it. And there's no other, you know, there's going to be no other option. I am going to do it. And that mindset is probably hard to understand for a lot of people, but when you've been through the experiences I have in my life, you know how to you know how to take on things, you know, and you know how to get your mind in the right place, and you know how to prioritize what's important in life and what's not, and what you're capable of. You know how to eat well, and focus. Yeah, I guess focus. So, going into your questions, what inspired you to join the Royal Marines? I was homeless, living in my car. A friend of mine whose father was a Falklands hero, you could say, had just joined the Marines, or he'd just done what was called the Potential Recruits course. That's a 3-day introduction to Royal Marines life. You go along to Lympstone, and you know, you're just kids. We were all just kids, right? But then they put you through the whole experience, but condensed to 3 days. So you're running the endurance course, the assault course. You're falling backwards off a 10-meter high diving board. You're getting interviews with naval personnel to see, you know, do you know anything about the Marines? Why are you here? What are your sort of intentions? And so my friend came back off this 3-day course, and he was buzzing. You know, he's accepted into Royal Marines training, and he spent ages telling me how hard it was, and yeah, I mean, of course it's hard. And then he said those you know, what can we say, infamous words, but of course you can't do it. Well, yeah, I'd had a challenging upbringing, been kicked out of home, you know, at 15, again at 17, hence why I was living in my car. I'd been to 5 schools before the age of 10 years old, and you know, I don't need to dictate all that. You can kind of guess my childhood wasn't the, you know, the smoothest. And so for my friend to say to me, well, you couldn't do it, I was like, oh yes I can. And I went down to the recruiting office on the Monday morning, and yeah, you know, I set out to prove him wrong, and I set out to show the family that had kicked me out that I was worth more than they said I was. And so I probably joined for all the wrong reasons. You were 18 when you joined. Was it hard to adjust to the job at such a young age? It's a brilliant question. It's like this. For me, it was a golden opportunity from being unemployed, probably unemployable. You know, I had 2 O-levels from school and I think 3 GCSEs, and suddenly I'd kind of just sidestepped myself into an elite career where I was getting paid, yeah, an enormous amount of money at 18. It's a career you're so proud of. You know, you're training to earn the Green Beret. It's the most respected military accolade worldwide, you know, from a sort of infantry perspective. I mean, you know, I wasn't joining the special forces. That's something that comes later for Marines. But you know, I was joining the hardest military training course in the world, and that I had no, I didn't think about yet tomorrow, right? I didn't think about tomorrow. I thought about today. What is on our training schedule? What do I have to do to get through today? Of course, I have my doubts. Like, you know, I mean, a big part of Royal Marines training is to make you feel that you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that everyone's looking at you. And I I just got through all that, Sophie. You know, I was caught up in it. It was better than being unemployed and living in my car. Um, to the other side of the coin, you know, I know 16-year-old guys that joined up, and I think for all of us of that that naivety, you know, I mean, you know, I say it and I say it again. You know, we was kids. Um, I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of um, there's a lot of infighting, you can say. And when you're, you know, when you're 18, I was 9.5 stone. I was tiny. You know, I had to really stand up for myself a lot. Like, I got a lot of shit for um, just. I think in that aggressive and military environment, everyone tries to scapegoat everybody else to put the focus off them. So from that perspective, you know, it's yeah, it's a big old thing. But no, it wasn't hard to adjust at all. I went straight into it. I'm not going to say I loved it, because that's not that doesn't sum it up. I was just involved in something, and I if I was honest, I just wanted the Green Beret. I wanted to prove I could be a commando, and I didn't think outside that parameter, you know, which was probably lucky for me. And I've always been lucky. I've never been like a homesick guy. I didn't have a girlfriend at home, so so no, it wasn't hard to adjust. It's just it's just an effort to just keep doing what you're being asked to do and make sure you don't fail everything. You know, you get a lot of um, tests on the way as you go through this 8 months of training, and you're obviously, the training team is building you up for these tests. Some are physical, some are mental, some are a skill level, like camouflage and concealment, for example. Um, and some of them are just bloody hard, like running 30 miles across Dartmoor, carrying full you know, carrying your full fighting equipment. Um, and I just took on one at a time. My benefits is I was very good at the gym work. My dad built me a climbing frame when I was 5 years old, and it was the height of our house. And he built it out of scaffolding poles, and it had a big rope swing. So from like 5 years old, I've been climbing, and that just came so naturally to me. Um, the running, quite ironically, considering I've just run 1,000 miles, and it was, you know, I kind of made easy work of it, I think you could say. The running was really, really, really hard. It was the running in full kit, the speed marches. I I can't put into words how much pain I was in from probably 200 yards in, and some of them were 6 miles, some of them were 9 miles, some of them were 12 miles, and the last one's 30 miles, and that took everything, took everything in me. And I wouldn't give up, because I wouldn't give my parents the satisfaction of seeing me fail. They didn't want me to fail, of course they didn't, you know, but we had all this challenges in our family growing up, and there was such bad words has been spoken over the years that you know, us three kids, I've got a sister, a brother, and a sister who was born later. But yeah, we all just went through quite a lot of shit. In fact, an interesting thing here for your article is people talk about PTSD a lot, and my question to the science world or the social world is, what about guys like me? I had PTSD before I joined. I had a really challenging childhood, and it's damaging is the only word you can really use, and you carry that damage with you through life, don't you? And when you're in new environments like the military, you've got all these other kind of angles and challenges coming at you from all different directions, and that is interacting with like what your life experience has already been. And so, to maybe give a simple example, if you come from a very stable background, maybe your family's a bit middle class, mummy and daddy help you with your homework, they made sure you got through school and you got 3 A levels and and then you decided to join the Marines, you're probably going to be quite a well-adjusted character, right? And then of course you got guys like me that were just, didn't really know who I was, didn't really like violence because I just already seen too much of it in my life. Growing up as a school kid in the 70s was incredibly violent, and I think people these days wouldn't understand that. They wouldn't be able to relate to it. But when I was a school kid, it's like any adult could just come up and belt you, and quite often they belted you because they thought you were a kid that had done something wrong. It turned out they got the wrong person. But like a complete stranger could come running across the road and smack you around the head. I mean, you're like 6 years old, for crying out loud. Well, how are you supposed to make sense of that? And that was normal back then. So going back to the PTSD thing, yeah, I think a lot of us carried issues into our adult life from there. And then of course you chuck a war scenario on top of that where you see horrendous stuff. Then you leave the military after and you get into the can I say evils of drinking, drugs, depression. You get family problems, and it all starts to cascade in on itself. And then you can see why so many servicemen end up homeless and end up on the suicide statistics. Yeah, it's not good. So what was serving in Northern Ireland like? I suppose the first thing I should say is I was 19 by that stage. What the hell did I know about global politics? I was just told we're going over to this part of the United Kingdom, that there's some good guys and there's some bad guys, and when you're that young and you can't relate this to anything else, so you just accept the narrative. And I mean, we were servicemen. It wasn't like we could turn around and say, no, sorry, we're not doing that. It was I mean, that in itself is quite crazy. We arrived there and we were travelling from the airport to our barracks, and they chucked us in the back of these armoured vehicles. They were called pigs back in the day. And I was the guy at the back of this particular pig. There was, I don't know, maybe 12 of us crammed into it, and it was driving us to our camp, and I was looking out. There was a slot like this big. So what are we talking? 12 inches wide by 3 inches. And I'm pushing it open, and I'm looking it out, and I'm trying to take in Belfast. Obviously somewhere I'd never been before. And we drove past a pub, and as we drove past this pub, there was all guys like, you know, smoking and drinking outside the pub, and they just stopped what they're doing, dropped everything, and they scrambled to pick up any object that they could, and they just started throwing it at our vehicle. And of course I was the guy looking out the window, and I'm like, guys, you won't believe this. I mean, it was surreal. You've got to remember, you're a 19-year-old soldier, Marine in my case. You're going on patrol, and you're walking down the main street in the United Kingdom, and you're carrying a machine gun. That's just crazy in itself. What got crazier is when we patrolled into an area called the Ardoyne. We'd not been in this area before, and we were crossing a park, and as we stepped onto the grass, an IRA sniper opened up from behind us. They'd taken a family hostage during the day, and they'd taken over their house, and the guy was out the back, basically out the back window, with a Kalashnikov, which is not exactly a sniper's rifle, but it was just the weapon of choice in this particular incident. And he fired best part of 10 shots at our patrol, and you could just hear doo, 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 doo. And I just saw the grass flicking up around my feet. We ran, we took cover, and then I looked back, and my what we call tail end Charlie was a guy called, in my book I call him Jock Campbell, in my book Eating Smoke, and he's just sparked out on the grass. And I was the first aider in the team, so my first reaction is I started running back to, you know, to go and get this guy, and I could just hear my team screaming, "Get down, get down, get down, Chris, get down!" I thought, well, I can't, you know, I can't do that. My buddy's out there and he's injured, and so I started running back, and as I ran back, his head popped up, and he started looking around frantically. He grabbed his equipment, which had all been flung from his body, and came running over. He said, "I'm hit, I'm hit, I'm hit." And I ripped open his combat jacket, and I pulled his flat jacket off. And I'm like, "Jock, you're not hit, you're not hit. I'm fucking hit, I'm fucking hit, I'm fucking hit." And it was all just so confusing. And the long shot of that was we'd been opened up on by this IRA sniper. He'd fired these 10 rounds. He'd obviously gone for Jock first, and he'd taken the aerial off his radio equipment. He'd shot through the sling on his SA-80, and then the third round had hit him in the chest, which had spun him around, which is why his equipment had flown off. And then obviously the guy had then set his sights on me, which is why the ground was flicking up like this. And fortunately for Jock, the wadding of the vest that he was wearing protected him from being killed, you know. So we all lived to fight another day, and it was yeah, it was insane. We were bombed. We ran out the front gate of our camp. As we ran out the front gate, the IRA bombed the back gate. We were mortar bombed in our beds one night, so the mortar alarm went off and these mortars went up in the sky, and they came down, and fortunately they missed everybody in the camp, but they knocked a kid off his bicycle. I think the kid was fine, but you know, I don't think these things are an exact science. And we got sniped out in the countryside. One time when I was leading a patrol, as I stepped into a gateway of in a hedge, a round just came across me, and Jock and I, we just pepper potted up this steep hill. As we came out on the main road across this, it was like heathland, moorland. We came out on the main road, and there was a car parked 200 meters down with its it still had its lights on, which was kind of strange. And we had a quick conversation, right, what to do. And as we had that conversation, the car drove off. So, you know, nothing really ever came of it. But it was the 20th anniversary of British troops in the province, and the IRA had put out this declaration they were going to kill as many Marines servicemen as possible. And in one particular day, I think there was 176 violent incidents. So we're talking bombings, shootings, kidnappings, hijackings, buses being set on fire, post offices robbed, this kind of thing. So yeah, that was what Northern Ireland was like, and yeah, we took it on the chin. We dealt with it, you know, professionally, and I can't say fortunately, but we lost one Marine very early on in the tour. I'd let the patrol out of I was standing like I was guard duty on the main gate, and half the patrol went out the back gate, half the patrol went out my front gate. And as I let them out, about 5 minutes later, he just said, and you could hear all this rifle fire just going off down the road. And it turned out a car had driven towards the patrol, fired 2 shots at the Marine, which killed him dead. And then the Marines had opened up and they'd fired 18 rounds in return. And yeah, that was what Northern Ireland was like. And sadly, our brother was killed. How did life change when you moved to Hong Kong? So I moved to Hong Kong. I'd started a business in the Marines. It was marketing electronic products. It was through a network marketing organization, and my business became really, really successful in Hong Kong, to the point where I was kind of being touted as the next millionaire in this marketing company. So I put my notice in the Marines to go and move to Hong Kong, which is where obviously all the action was. And by the time I'd served my 18 months notice, the the company supplying our network the products, was called Quorum International, had collapsed, and I literally was just stranded in kind of Hong Kong with no means to make any money. I'd gone from £100,000 turnover of my business a month to literally nothing. And when I was making the kind of big bucks, all of that was going back into my business. So it wasn't as though I had, like, you know, I got to stop hitting this light, sorry. It wasn't as though like I had massive savings or anything. So there I was. Yeah, I was. To answer your question, I found myself exactly back in the place from before I joined the Marines. So I was unemployed. I was bunking with a guy, so I was, virtually homeless. I mean, I had no place of my own. I had no career, no job, and I had no way, I had nothing to offer anyone. So, but further to that, like, I didn't want to go back to the UK. I loved Hong Kong. It was great. I'd gone out there to make my fortune, and I was determined to do it. And I took a job in a computer company. It was pretty crazy. We sold DRAM chips, which is computer memory. I'm trying to build up to your next question here, which is, how did you spiral into crystal meth addiction? So I took a job in this crazy computer company, and we were supposed to be selling this DRAM on the international market, but the market in this commodity, which is, it's sold like gold on the market. I mean, the prices used to go up and down every day, and you'd buy here and you'd sell there, and you get guys from Indonesia, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong itself, the UK, United States, all phoning into your office trying to get this DRAM trading like gold dust, right? But of course, I didn't speak Cantonese. I didn't know any of the suppliers. I was basically like the other 10 guailos, we're called. Guailo, it means foreign devil. I was just there to make up the numbers, and you'd need to read my book to understand this, but this very old wizened Chinese boss, he thought, if I've got white guys in my business, it's going to look like I've got a real international business. He didn't really care whether we sold anything, because he's a multi-millionaire anyway, and the trades were coming off the Chinese, the Cantonese people in the office anyway. They were making like, up to $1 million each trade, so it didn't really matter what we did, but we kind of looked the part, So I did that for 7 months, and it becomes so boring that one day a guy said to me, fellow expat working in the company, sorry, a guy called Neil Diamond. He said, "Chris, do you want to try some of this?" And we'd gone to the toilet on our lunch break, and he said, "Chris, do you want to try some of this?" And I said, "Yeah, well, what is it?" He said, "Oh, it's crystal meth." Oh, that sounds like fun, It kind of broke up the monotony of that day. So I smoked one line of crystal meth off a piece of silver foil, and I didn't think anything else, else of it. I went back to my desk, and my life just changed. My life, what I thought was life, just changed. I just had this amazing sense of well-being come over me. And the way I describe it in Eating Smoke is, it's like getting high on the finest champagne, but without having all that kind of like, oh, I feel fucking pissed, you know, that heady feeling. It just a real high, and it kind of goes up and doesn't really stop. But along with that feeling of being really nicely high, you get this amazing energy and this enormous sense of creativity. And so my next move was like, right, I've got to get some more of this stuff, you know. I can't wait. And I started just to take it more and more, and it used to just be, you know, 3 times a week in an evening I'd just smoke a bit of this stuff, and I got really into writing, hence why I'm now a writer. And I was getting into writing musical lyrics and stuff, and it really opened my eyes up to the fact that at school I was basically told I was a failure and the system failed me, and I left feeling a failure. And yet suddenly here's this wonder drug telling me, no, actually you're not, you know, you're actually quite good at stuff. And you know, that's a dangerous, it's good in one respect, but of course it's kind of taking you down a, I don't want to say dangerous path, because like I love my life and I've got no regrets, so how can I say it was bad, Sophie, right? You know, and please, I hope, don't make it out in your article that it's bad, because addiction, it's challenging. Sadly, in statistically very rare cases, people die, but it's really rare. But for people like myself, it's like we needed to go through that, because I'd had such a damaged sense of self growing up. Like I didn't know who I was, and because, and you know, who wants to go through life not knowing who they are? And through this process of addiction, which really took me down low, I eventually, you know, built myself back up on a much better footing, if that makes sense, and went on to achieve every single thing I ever dreamt of in the whole world, you know. And that lesson, from the perspective of servicemen who are now homeless and committing suicide, you know, it needs to be told that it's not, it doesn't have to be such a negative thing, mental health, right? You know, having a breakdown, it's not the worst thing in the world. People take drugs the world over, you know. Society needs to start waking up to this, instead of pretending like it's rare examples and it's kind of so bad. I hope I'm making sense here. So that's how I kind of spiraled into addiction. It's a tough ride. It seems all good at the time. The reason people continue the action, i.e. taking the drug, when everything around them is starting to break down and fall down and their life is falling apart, is when you take a substance that just makes you feel the best you've ever felt, and you think it's like the answer to your prayers, and it overcomes all this, you know, traumatic stress that you've had all your life. Why would you not want to keep doing that, you know? I mean, that, you know, people take a lot of prescription medication because they want to feel like that good all the time, right? You know, it's not hugely different, and so that's why I kept on down that path. Is, to me, this drug was the answer. It made me feel great. I felt I could get stuff done. I didn't like not want to be on this drug, but of course, unbeknown to me, my life's falling apart, but I can't see that, because I can only see the brilliance of this pathway that I'm on, you know. So I ended up I went through a succession of jobs. I lost most of them through various reasons. I was DJ of the biggest club in southern China. I completely blagged the job. I'd never been a DJ before. I just went along and I kind of used my personality and outgoing kind of marine-like persona to completely blag this job. And I was DJing in a nightclub to, like, my first night was 300 people, and you know, I lost that job through, oh, you have to read my book, it's just too much. I had a job selling advertising space in a business directory, and it turned out it didn't actually exist. I mean, it was there, like one copy in the office on the shelf, and the boss never printed anymore. But we would phone up companies and basically con them into advertising in this book, and they would pay all the money. And of course, well, the book was never, you know, there was maybe, I don't know, 30 copies published, a few in the office in case anyone ever came to visit. But it was no, you know, there was no book, and there was a lot of kind of those sort of scams going on in Hong Kong, and I couldn't do that. I mean, I did it once and twice, and I realised we were kidding these you know, business executives who were just signing checks without even realising, and I couldn't do that. So I took a job as a doorman. I thought I'd kind of get back to my marine roots, and the drugs just like kept getting the better of me. I was getting iller and iller. I went from being a 14-stone bodybuilder, like it was huge. I had 19-inch biceps. They were ridiculous. Yeah, I gradually just went down to probably the 9.5 stone I was when I'd joined the Marines. And I was wandering the streets homeless. I'd started to develop psychosis, so I didn't really know what was going on. I mean, I was living my life, but everything started to become this big conspiracy. I was reading far too much into situations. I'd pick up a book, look at the back cover, and like the information on it would be just, it would just seem like there was some conspiracy going on, and the way the words were, and of course I was in clinical psychosis, and then, you know, I wasn't to know that when you're mentally ill, you don't necessarily know you don't necessarily know you're mentally ill. So, and it was kind of crazy because nobody that around me knew that I was this ill. They just saw me as Chris. And so I took a job in a nightclub. It turned out it was run by the 14K. The 14K of Hong Kong's probably the biggest triad society, and also the one that's sort of revered for being the most violent. And I didn't know this. I just thought I was getting a job as a doorman, and it was my third job as a doorman by this time. And it wasn't until my first night on the job that a fellow expat called me over and, Chris, do you know the deal here? And I was like, I'm sure you're going to tell me. He said, yeah, well, they're all triads. He said, this guy here, this is my partner on the door. It's called Chu Chai. He said, yeah, he's a street fighter. He's what they call Magi, means little horse. He's like a triad runner. But don't be mistaken, he's like one of the most violent men you could ever meet. And if you ever see him in a fight, he you know, he will just pick up anything if he thinks he can, you know, kind of cave an enemy's head in with it. And he said, this guy here, and he pointed to my other fellow doorman. So it was me, just the expat, and two triad doormen. Daisu, and this guy was like 6'7". Daisu's a paid assassin, or he's a triad assassin. He said every so often you'll see him disappear, and they'll smuggle him over the border into China, and he'll carry some hit out on someone, and then they'll smuggle him back, right? And yeah, what can I say? And then he said, "Oh, your boss here, David. He's Dilo. It means big brother. Big brother is like a triad gang boss. He runs this whole club. He's a very important man in Wanchai, and like don't mess with him, you know." And to be honest, like they were really good to me. There were a lot of people trying to get me involved in crime, and I wasn't like massively up for, you know, I still kind of like my own person. And you ask here, like, when did your life reach its turning point? Well, that's kind of a difficult question to ask, because I had probably 3 or 4 different turning points. One night I'd kind of fallen out with all these triads, and they set me up for what I thought I was going to be murdered in this club. The situation just started getting really heavy and really nasty, and I had triads just coming into the club from the other doorman from other clubs in Wanchai, saying, "You're gonna die tonight," you know. And it wasn't nice. It was really kind of easy to be intimidated, but just because of my Royal Marines background, I wasn't, you know, I just wasn't gonna show any kind of fear. And yeah, as it all turned out, again, you know, need to read my book, but it was all like it was some sort of initiation game, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'll move on. When did your life reach its turning point? I got so ill, I tried to shin across a cable going across the Jaffe Road in Hong Kong. It was going between my skyscraper and the skyscraper on the other side of the street, or tenement buildings, and it was carrying a water pipe. And one night, in my madness, I suppose you'd say, I thought like I had to crawl across this pipe. I thought it was everything my commando training had set me up for. I thought, like, if I just crawl across this wire, when I get to the other side, everything will make sense. I'll know why I'm in Hong Kong, why it's been such a challenging, you know, year, why everything just has gone so wrong for me. I mean, I really was that ill, Sophie, you know, and I started to crawl across this wire, and I'm looking down, and the cars are tiny and the people were tiny, and I got about like 5 foot out, and I'm swinging there doing my commando crawl, and I just suddenly thought, what am I doing? Or like, what? Why am I doing it? What? I don't have to prove anything to anyone, you know. Like, I don't, and I don't need to. And what? Why am I doing this? Because I'm thinking like I'm gonna get accepted if I get to the other side, and I thought about my brother, who's like my best friend, and like, how would it be for him if he heard I'd thrown myself off a skyscraper in Hong Kong? Because that's what people would say, right? They wouldn't understand that. No, it was the opposite. I was like trying to prove that nothing's wrong with me, you know. And that was it. And tears just started pouring down my face, and I suddenly in that moment I really missed my brother, who I hadn't called him for a year. I hadn't really spoken to him, and yeah, that was, you know, that was one turning point. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I'm still recording. And sorry, bear with me. But my kind of final turning point was I was back in the UK. I spent 2 years after Hong Kong absolutely depressed. I didn't know I was depressed because no one, thinks to tell you that you might be depressed, right? Um, I was the only time I could function is if I could get hold of drugs, any kind of amphetamine. There was nothing like the ice in Hong Kong. There was nothing that strong in the UK. But if I could get some speed, methamphetamine it's called, that then I could function for like 3 days, and then I would crash. I'd be depressed again for a week. And bear with me. So yeah, where was I? So yeah, I'm back in the UK. In my mind, I guess I'd lost everything. I'd lost my career in the Marines. I'd lost $1 million business. Worse still, I just couldn't see a future in myself. I had no qualifications, just a few O levels and, well, 2 O levels. I had no trade. I hadn't, trained for a trade in the military, and it was a really miserable time. And the only way I could raise myself out of this depression was to take drugs. But because I had no money, I could only buy a little bit, and then I'd crash, and then I'd get my benefit check again. I'd buy a little bit more, and I'd be great for 3 days, and then I'd crash. And that went on for ages. And then one day I had what I guess you call an epiphany. I woke up one day and I just thought, my God, it's like these drugs, they're not working anymore, are they? They're not working anymore. And if I was honest, they probably hadn't worked for me for quite a long time. And why was I still putting myself through this? And the sun was shining through my window, and I just gazed at that sun, and it did two things really. It reminded me that there was a world outside I no longer felt a part of. I was ashamed of myself. I hadn't bought any new clothes for years. My house was an absolute mess. And I just asked myself the question, Chris, why? Why have you done this to yourself? And then I thought about that little kid that I was, like a toddler, that I didn't ask for all the shit that I'd been through as a kid. But like I'm the adult now, right? So I'm the guy that should be looking after that kid, and I'm not doing it. I'm abusing myself, I'm abusing myself through drugs and through bad thinking, and in that moment, the other factor was this sun was shining, and it's kind of telling me like everything's going to be all right, and that I'm all right, and that the world's all right, and that I'm really, really lucky that I'm still, in this world. And when you've been in the Marines, you lose a lot of friends. You lose a lot of friends, not just through combat, but through misadventure, motorcycle accidents. And I had one friend was killed on a night out running away from the police. He jumped off a building, and he landed on a fence and it impaled him, and you know, he died. And I just made a promise to myself right there and then in that moment that I was going to turn things around, that I wasn't going to try and be an angel. You know, it wasn't about like, hey, let's stop doing drugs, and it was more about, let's get some balance back in your life, Chris, you know. And that's what I did, and I obviously cut down on the drugs that I was taking, and I started to make a conscious effort to try to do one thing every day, even if it was just the washing up. You know, that was like a massive leap forward for me. And in some part of that process, I came across an advert for people, volunteers required to go and work in Africa. So I studied 6 months at a university in Norway, and I worked for a further 6 months in Mozambique with street children. And it was just humbling, and it was right for me at that time in my life. I then drove a bus full of volunteers to India and back, and we wrote articles about people living in poverty. Yeah, that was me turning it around, and I took a globe. I had a world globe, and I just marked on it well, similar to, you know, what you can see behind me, no surprise. And I marked on it everywhere that I was going to go. So including everywhere I'd already been in the Marines. You know, there's about 80 countries across all 7 continents. And I traveled them one by one. I put a backpack on. I backpacked from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina. I've traveled to every single country in North, South and Central America now, or at least on the mainland. I've, as I said, lived, worked and travelled now in 80 different countries. I'm a pilot, skydiver, advanced scuba diver. I'm an Antarctic explorer, best-selling author, university graduate. I'm an ultra runner, obviously. I run 1,000 miles non-stop. I ran the London Marathon in 3 hours 56. And more recently, I'm a father. You know, I have a gorgeous partner. She really is just more than I ever could have believed in, really. My son, Harry, you know, I kind of always had this dream. I never expected to have kids, or I wasn't massively impassioned about it like some people are, right? But I always kind of had this feeling like, if I had a kid, wouldn't it be great if he was like the best kid in the world, the most handsome, the funniest. And if you meet my Harry, you know, that's exactly what I've got. It's just incredible. Yeah, I'm a very lucky man, you know, and I have no regrets. I don't think addiction is a bad thing, you know. Sadly, if people die, yeah, of course they think that's bad. But, you know, mental health is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that can be an experience that you gain from. The doctors doubted you could overcome addiction and depression. How did you prove them wrong? You know, I didn't set out to prove the doctors wrong. It's just that they just couldn't deal with someone like me. I was a proud ex-serviceman, and I was on my life track. And of course, your doctors just want to take you off it because they want you to be normal, what is normal in their books, right? And that, it's a process. Life is a process. And everything's got to be done at the time that's right for you. So it wasn't like I set out to prove them wrong, or I had a dislike for them or anything. It's just you know, they couldn't really help a person like me, I guess. I'm too independent, and of course crystal meth is not something that's massive in the UK, so they didn't really understand that as a drug. I then had psychosis, which just flagged up alarm bells. They thought I was mentally ill and I would be like that for the rest of my life. And I'm lucky, you know, when I stopped the crystal meth, the psychosis went away. You've used your platform to speak about your experiences and raise awareness for veterans and mental health. Do you think enough is done to help veterans when they're discharged? Oh, absolutely not. You know, as a military number, you're expendable. That's just it. In the eyes of the government, you're a commodity. You're there to go and fight the wars of the ruling elite, to make the Tony Blairs, you know, and the George Bushes and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers extremely rich, you know, or powerful, should I say? And that really is what your job is in the modern life. You know, these past conflicts are dubious, to say the least, right? And that in itself is a factor which has damaged so many of our young men and women. You know, it's one thing giving your all for something you can believe in, and you know, for freedom and equality and good against evil, but when you realize that your efforts, you've just been taken advantage of, you know, what am I supposed to say? You know, is enough done to help? No, it's it's absolutely not enough. For a start, we need special courts like they have in America that deal with veterans issues, not because we deserve special treatment, you know, we're better people in any way, but we just have unique issues because of the mindset that I've explained, because of the people they are when we join up, then what we go through, and then what we have to experience afterwards. It puts us in a unique situation. You can find yourself a criminal, as I was technically taking drugs, but like, are you really a criminal or are you a victim? I'm going to say that you're more a kind of victim, right? So just locking people up in prison is futile in my situation. You know, I needed support, I needed help, I needed you know, people that would support my rehabilitation. Okay. You know, when you're in the military, you have everything taken care of. If you have any kind of issue, there's someone there in the medical profession that's going to help you, whether it's drugs, alcohol, mental health, physical health. It's all taken care of. And the second you leave, it's nothing. It's like, go and see your GP, and services are they're just not there, or they're there but the waiting lists are so long, or the funding isn't available, or the expertise isn't in place. Yeah. Last question. Did writing a book help your healing process? No, absolutely not. I didn't write a book for any kind of healing stuff. I wrote a book because I wanted to be an author, and I wanted to get over that thing in my life where I had nothing to offer and no career prospect. So I thought, what can I do? Well, I can maybe try writing. I think I could be good at that. So I wrote about my Hong Kong story. The other side of that coin is I've just trawled up stuff that was like 20, 30 years ago now. It's stuff I should have dealt with and not even be thinking about now. And of course, I now have to think about it every day. So it's no, it doesn't help me heal at all. it's the other way around. It kind of keeps the wounds open. But if it can help someone, you know, then so be it. Has your book helped other veterans on? It's helped a lot of people. I think it's helped a lot of civilians to understand what us veterans go through. I think it was brought home to me more with my run when I ran from John O'Groats to Land's End to raise awareness of veteran suicide. Then I had massive feedback. I had people writing to me whose partner had killed themselves, you know, ex-forces who'd killed themselves. I had people that were thinking of killing themselves that wrote to me to say thank you. You know, it had a massive effect on people, for the positive. So yeah. Okay, sorry if I've gone on so long. I hope that's just about covered it. It's a lot of information. I hope you can make some sense of it. Message me if there's anything more I can help you with. And on behalf of our veterans, you know, thank you for taking an interest in our story.